Welcome to Across the Realm Psychic Talk Radio. I'm your host, Holly Joy. Today we are here with Marilyn Redmond, a winning international writer, syndicated columnist, consultant, counselor, regression and past life therapist, and speaker, sharing the dynamics for healing your life. She's also a member of the American Board of Hypnotherapy and the International Board for Regression Therapy that was introduced into the who's who's for professionals and executives for her innovative and pioneering work, restoring traumatic lives, healing emotional causes of illness, and releasing negative energy through innovative therapeutic techniques. Welcome, Marilyn.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Good to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I know that you're multi-talented. On your website, angelicasgifts.com, you offer your books, psychic and mediumship readings, channeling of ascended masters, counseling services, artwork, and more. But what we're going to focus on today is your latest book publication available on Amazon entitled The Real Meaning of 2012, A New Paradigm, Bringing Heaven to Earth.
Well, I'm real excited to talk about it. Thank you.
So first things first, tell us what's so important about the year 2012.
Well, a lot of people aren't aware that the energy on the planet changed at 2012. There was a lot of talk at the time about December 21st, 2012. And just like when the calendar changed from 1999 to 2000, people said, well, what happened? Nothing happened. Well, that's kind of how it went with 2012, except that energy changes very slowly. So 2012 actually is starting to manifest physically into our realm right now. It was doing it on a subconscious level in 2012, and now we're going to start by the end of the year seeing many physical manifestations of more positive energy on planet Earth.
Great explanation. Thank you. So why is discussing the emotional part of our lives so important in understanding of this year, 2012?
Well, our emotions have been pretty well conditioned to stay in third dimension, which is a low emotion of fear. And the remnants of fear produce shame, guilt, jealousy, envy. Some people call them the 7 deadly sins. And so we've been pretty much suppressed in a depressive type of atmosphere emotionally. And 2012 was the changing of that energy to being more positive. The Earth is now receiving more positive energy than it has for 13,000 years. And so we can actually rise our energy, our inner emotions, our spirit, however you want to define it, into higher vibrations and come into that higher consciousness of joy, which is your name. And we can enjoy actually living in it, not just a word called joy, but actually experiencing that heaven on earth, the grace of God, or grace of living in love. So the emotions have to change. You have to do the housework inside, the inner house cleaning, and release all the fear. And then you can have space for the happiness to come in and take that up the void. You can't really have a void. Nature abhors a void. So when you release the guilt or whatever turmoil you've had, depression, rejection, abandonment, those issues that are negative energy, when those are released, then we have the ability to move up in our consciousness, and that consciousness is what we attract. That's the law of attraction. So we're going to start attracting wonderful new things into our lives, which we have always wanted and prayed for peace on earth. But as we get peace inside, we're actually going to attract peace. It's not just going to be a prayer. It's going to happen actually in manifesting.
So would you say that the shift with 2012 has made it easier for people to raise their vibration and tap into this emotional work that needs to be done?
It has made it possible because the lower energy is not sustainable in love or in a higher energy. You can't have the light and the darkness at the same time. So it's like walking into a dark room and turning on the light. That's where we are now. We're turning on the light, and where's the darkness? So it's going to disappear.
Right, right. So for people that are still living in fear, how is that creating an illusion for them in their lives?
Good question. I lived in that for many, many years and didn't know it was an illusion. What I know today is anything that's not positive is an illusion. It's not of God. There's only one power, and that's reality. The love is the law of love. some people call it the Lord, but it stands for the law of love in our current vocabulary. And so when we're in that law of love, we're in a better place than what we could have had before the energy changed, because the energy wasn't possible to sustain that. So some people, we have had ascended masters in the past that were able to go to the mystery schools, release that negative energy, and it was a very difficult thing in that darker energy to do. They're very, that they did it is amazing. And we're going to be able to do it much easier because the energy will support us.
Wonderful, thank you. So in your book, you have scientific terms and spiritual terms. How would you say that these both fit into this information that you're providing?
Well, that's a good question, because so many people are kind of in divided camps. There's the scientists, and then there's the spiritual people, and they go back and forth with their terms. And it's all about semantics, because what the scientists are talking about is really, I've written an article about this too. It's really the same terms, the same information that the spiritual people are talking about. It's just a different word. So you can call it the light of God, or you can call it, in the physics of science, you can just call it a vibrating energy that's very, very high and usually invisible. So that invisible energy that's vibrating is the same as like a higher spirit. So it doesn't matter which camp you're in, you're really talking about the same thing. It's just which terms are you using, and hopefully people will come to see that, oh, it's just another way to say the same thing.
And as time goes on, do you feel that the scientific community and the spiritual community are going to unite more?
Well, that's what my writing is trying to encourage people to do. I have an article on my blog about this. Yes, I believe that they're going to come to an understanding that they've actually been talking about the same thing. In my research, I found out that many thousands of years ago, the church actually understood this and purposely separated the two camps so that people didn't have the truth of that information, that they're really the same thing.
That is unfortunate.
Right. It's led us astray in many ways.
Yes. So in your book, you talk a lot about energy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel that this applies to our consciousness?
Well, that is our consciousness, and so many people don't understand that the energy, we are energy fields. People are energy fields. It manifested from spirit, and the spirit has different vibrations. And so the consciousness inside a person is what they attract. So if a person is in a low vibration, such as depression, they're going to attract those lower types of experiences that are usually irrational and cause difficulty, because a rational decision will bring a really good results. But if you're in a depressed state of mind, like I was for years, my life just kept going down the tubes. It didn't get better and better because I couldn't send out better energy or better consciousness. And in the Bible, when people talk about Jacob's ladder, that's really what it is. It's the ladder of consciousness. And in my book, I created a new chart to show people the steps of consciousness and how you can move up step by step into a higher consciousness. And in my chart, there's angels on the stairs as you go up into a higher consciousness of what we really want to attract, which is the happiness and the bliss, the ecstasy and the joy. So we can release all that negative, fearful energy and actually change that step by step as we move higher and higher with our energy vibrating, which is raising our consciousness. And that's what Jesus did. He had raised his consciousness into the fifth dimension. That's what the mystery schools taught people to do.
So we talked a little bit about the third dimension.
Right.
And that energy can transform into the fourth dimension. Would you say that's what we're doing now, that we're transforming into the fourth dimension?
Well, as of this point in time, most people are in fourth dimension, leaving third, because the energy has brought us on the planet. The energy's moved into fourth dimension. So there's you might notice a lot of people leaving the planet in various ways. and because it's not sustainable any longer. So fourth dimension is actually a transition from third to fifth. It's like going up the stairs of the ladder. We just don't jump into fifth dimension. Our body psychically or electrically, the energy circuit couldn't handle to just jump into full force of having this wonderful loving energy in us. We have to do it little by little, and otherwise we would blow our circuits. We'd end up probably in a mental hospital. So we're doing it step by step through fourth dimension, and the more you release, the higher you go. The more you let go and let God, the higher then the God consciousness can occur. So it's an incremental thing, and it takes a long time generally to move through those stages, and that's where reincarnation comes in. Most of us have had that experience of working on it, and this is our last time we're ready to move into fifth dimension, and some people I have at this point, and that we are leaving behind fourth dimension because we have released so much of the negativity. It's not really part of our lives anymore, and it will be that way for more and more people as time progresses.
Now, would you say that your book could be used as a tool to help people raise their vibration and, as you said, get into like the fourth and fifth dimensions?
That was the whole idea. So many people have been told various things that were not really accurate from various sources, churches for one, and that you'll always be a sinner or you'll always be broken. You know, that's what somebody said yesterday that I was visiting with. And I said, no, that's not necessarily true. So as we move into this higher space, we're going to come into actually our birthright of what we were created in. The planet was a fifth dimension planet originally, and the fall of man wasn't necessarily what was described in the Bible. It was actually lowering our energy, our consciousness, through becoming more and more material focused. And that was the fall of man. So we're actually retracing our steps back into what the planet was originally, and that we're going to be able to have that 1,000 years of peace that so many people have heard about in the Bible is actually going to happen. Only that's down the pike. We're just, like you say, the fourth dimension is bringing us into that.
Now, a lot of light workers, they talk a lot about ego and addressing the ego so that you can pursue more spiritual work. Do you feel that ego has a purpose? And if so, what?
Well, it has actually a very good purpose. The problem is the ego became inflated and over-exaggerated and started running our lives. Originally, in the book, if you read it, I call it like a periscope on a submarine. It was supposed to come up and give us information. We came down as a spiritual being, not a human being. We didn't have skin on us. We were spirit, and originally. And so to live in this materialistic world, we needed information, which we do get from our five senses. And the ego, it was the tool through which we got our information. However, we lowered our energy, our consciousness so low, it became so threatened, it went into survival and exaggeratedly started to try to protect us. So in overprotecting us, it was an extreme reaction. And most people are still in that spot where they're still in survival. And the ego is keeping us in that place. And the point is that when we release the ego, which some people say edging God out, when we release that and actually merge God or love into our lives, however you want to define your higher power, you actually move out of this exaggerated, overprotective ego that's actually cut you off from the sunlight of the spirit. The light's inside of you, but it's been compacted out of fear, and then the light can't come out and happen in your life because of that. So when you realize you don't need the ego to protect you because you are now growing up into being mature, and that's what Christ consciousness is becoming a mature person. You don't need the ego to protect you, but you do need the ego because it's your basic personality of who you are. The essence, if you're in the center of the ego's focus and vibration, then you're in alignment, and that's just your identity and who you are as a spiritual being. But over-exaggerated, and that's what we're getting rid of, is the big exaggeration part of the ego.
Now, we know that you're a psychic, a medium, and a channeler. You do have some channeling work and videos available online as well. But my question is, because you have several books and lots of information online, would you say that any of this material is channeled?
I believe it's all channeled.
Yes.
I have another book coming out. 2012, this book called 2012 is really the explanation that it's possible to make, I call it make friends with your ego. You don't want to fight it. You don't want to get rid of it, because that would be getting rid of who you are. So I have, in my first book, I have a poem in there, and it's a fable. And the moral of the story was to make friends with the ego. And so when you do that, then you pull it into being supportive of your life rather than ruining your life. And I think I lost the question. I'm sorry.
Just about, you're saying how the information that you got. Yes.
Yeah, if it was channeled. In the preface of my next book, which is actually the very details of how to make friends with your ego, how to release it so it's not in charge of your life anymore, I explain in there that I came to this planet with this purpose in mind, to help people understand the process. And it is a process of how you can change your consciousness. And I believe that my guides and angels and masters have constantly been downloading me with all this information to share. And it's been a wonderful experience. Sometimes I wonder, well, where did this come from? Why do I know this? Nobody else seems to know that. And I believe it's all been channeled.
It's wonderful. So I'm curious if you grew up with a religious background.
I did. That was a big problem later when I became aware that there was a spiritual reality. I was raised in a very fundamental Christian background with lots of dogma, lots of guilt, and you're a sinner. And to overcome that, my church did not believe in meditation. And when I came into spiritual groups, which encouraged meditation, that was very scary for me, because I was told that was the devil's voice inside and not to listen to it. And literally, I know today is that the ego's voice is in my head, but God's or love's voice is in my heart. So I had to move from my head into my heart and listen to my heart. And that's the voice I needed to listen to. And that's the voice that has given me all the guidance and the writing material and the answers that I use for my counseling and helpful in the writing and so forth.
So do you feel that Christ consciousness, the wording of that, because lots of people, including myself, grew up with this religious background. So do you feel like the phrasing has been put in place to help these people move more away from the church and into themselves?
Well, what I understand today, what my masters and angels and guides have told me, is that when the Bible was written 2,000 years ago, the people didn't understand the energy. They didn't understand vibration. Their vocabulary was not as sophisticated as we have today, and the science wasn't to the degree that we have today. So the only way they could the Bible was put into words, and Jesus spoke in words that people could understand. But if he had talked about unconditional love, they wouldn't have even understood that. So they called it Christ consciousness. It's really moving. When you have the ego running your life, you're actually very immature. You're acting out of selfishness and scarcity and lack, and you're very self-centered, trying to survive. Well, when you outgrow that childish behavior and move into maturity, now, again, the word maturity back 2,000 years ago, what's that about? But so they called it Christ consciousness. So really, we're not doing anything that's really unusual except growing up. The planet is literally growing up, and we're part of that growing. And as we grow, the planet also grows. It works both ways with the energy.
I know that I personally am really excited for this lifetime, looking forward to the changes to come, and I'm glad that you are a part of that and helping others. So about on the topic of helping others, what would you say would be the three basic blocks for a better life?
Well, that's a good question. What I know today from my own experience, the three biggest blocks were I had to learn to be honest with myself, not just other people, or pay my bills on time. I had to learn to be self-honest. I had to learn to be sincere. I didn't know I wasn't sincere in those days, that I didn't come from my heart, because I was one scared little cookie in those days. I had a very abusive background. And so I was not sincere. I said what you wanted to hear because I didn't want to get hurt one more time. So, and then the other was to learn detachment. And that has been a very crucial thing. And most people don't want to give up being emotionally attached to the friends that they have, the family they have, their material items that they have, or their jobs or whatever. And you have to be totally free of all material people, places, and things to move into that maturity, so that only love is guiding you, only love is your source. And so the Christ consciousness is another way that they were able to connect with the people at the time in a language they could maybe understand. And so Jesus was one of the most visible people that acquired Christ consciousness. And so he was the example. It's possible to outgrow these selfish, self-centered ways, and hopefully people would learn from his example. But when you tell people they're immature, they don't want to hear that. And of course, especially 2,000 years ago, they didn't even realize that's what was going on in their culture. Today, we're more sophisticated.
So you're just talking about releasing attachments and material possessions. So would you say that relationships and achieving and wishing are actually things that could be working against us?
Yes, because they come from the ego again. When you are trying to make your life the way you want it, this is what I want, or this is what my desire is, to be able to have this job, or I can't make it in my life if I'm not married to Mr. So-and-so. You know, those things, when you look to material things for your well-being, you're actually keeping yourself immature. And because all things that you need come from spirit, and that's when it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all things will be added. If you're coming from love, the universe will automatically manifest everything you need. In fact, you will get more. Not going into spirit and into that place of grace actually keeps you from grace. So if you're really wanting to manifest a wonderful world, to release what you don't want, you're actually going to get more of what you do want. So to hang on to it is really kind of not a good idea.
So how would you suggest that people support this perception?
How do they support it?
Yeah, how could they achieve a higher consciousness and support this new perception coming in?
Well, yeah, that's what my counseling's about, and hopefully my writing people will pick up on, is that this has to really be done in the subconscious. Most people do not realize that spirit is invisible. And so to say affirmations works fine for so long, and then afterwards you have to actually go into the invisible part, your soul part of your life, and change that part to really manifest and attract, law of attraction, to attract what you truly want. You have to do it from your heart, from your soul. So you can't do it just superficially. You have to go inside. Now, some people do it in meditation. Some people have other similar ways to go into altered states. That's fine. I happen to use hypnosis and guide people through the path that, for whatever particular blockage we're removing. See, you don't have to look for God. You don't have to look for love, because it's already in your heart. We're created in the image of God. All we're doing is going inside of your consciousness and removing the blockages to that love. So as you release the loving, the blockages or barriers that have stopped the love coming out of your heart, that's what creates your reality. So you open your heart up completely, and that love comes out and makes your life actually heaven on earth. And most people are afraid to be vulnerable, but that's the safest place to be, because I came from domestic violence, and when I was told by Spirit to start praying for him, he never touched me again. It's the safest. You can't attack love. So when people are afraid to be vulnerable, they're keeping themselves in a victim state. They're keeping themselves suppressed and not being able to thrive, but they're just still surviving.
I'm glad to hear that, although some people might view your past experiences as negative, it appears that they have really worked towards your benefit and towards your work in helping others.
That's, I think, the biggest bonus. Some of the things I've gone through were not fun. It was not an easy life. Very difficult in some ways. That I'm still alive is really because of God and angels, literally. So what I know today is that it's what we don't see is where the power is. It's in the invisible spirit, and so many people are still very hooked into the manifested physical form, which actually is manifested from spirit. So we go back to the source. The spirit creates what we see and what happens in our life. Go back to that, change it. We will then have a different manifestation in our lives.
So I'm curious when you would have started your work on this path and how long you've been contributing, because you have so many various different things online. It just seems like you've done so much. When in your life would you say that you made that shift?
Well, it was a very traumatic night. My husband tried to kill me. Prior to that, I tried suicide. And I was really a walking zombie. I was in a domestic violent marriage. I was raised in domestic violence, lots of abuse in both situations. And so my life was hell, basically. Even though I went to church, even though I sat in the pew and I taught Sunday school, sang in the choir, I did not know that I wasn't connected to that spirit. I was not. It's like if you want the toaster to work, you have to plug it into the electricity. And my parents weren't mature enough and wise enough to show me how to do that. So I lived without that spiritual connection, and it just brought devastation. So the night that I didn't think that time I would get home alive, he tried to kill me and strangled and raped me several times. And that night I knew that was it. And I prayed out of my heart. I'd always used a hymnal for the prayers were in the hymnal at church, and those are the prayers we did. And that night in the car, I says, God, please help me. I really don't want to die. And literally within minutes, he was off the road, not driving like a wild maniac. So that was a safer situation. And over a very short period of time, opportunities started coming into my life that introduced me to treatment for codependency. I didn't even know the word in those days. And I found spiritual programs, 12-step programs, and gradually 30 years ago this month, I've been working on spiritual answers for my life and literally have transformed my life into a heaven on earth today. And it's an amazing thing. Like the other day, I had another miracle, and it literally showed up on my doorstep. I was looking for someone to help me with an audiobook I've been putting together with a man from Australia. And we needed someone to do the editing of this audiobook. We're going to put it on CDs and DVDs and download it. And I needed professional help and didn't know where to go necessarily. And this man showed up for a reading. Turned out he was the perfect person to help me. And we started talking about how he could do this for me and that for me and whatever. And I didn't have to go anywhere else. He could handle all the different things that needed to be done to make that happen. And it was like, thank you, God, my answers were solved. And just, by this one person showing up for a reading. So those things happen when you get into a space where you can attract, like attracts like. And he's a really sweet guy, and we're going to work together on getting that out for people. And so hopefully by before Christmas, that'll be out for people too.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. Lots of people label themselves as spiritual. So what would you say being a spiritual person means?
To me, it means living in love, unconditional love with no criticism or judgment or condemnation. Been there, done that. My mother was a very critical person. She was mentally ill. In fact, I asked her one day, why are you so critical of me? And she says, well, if I don't tell you what's wrong with you, who will? Not what I wanted to hear. And so today I understand how mentally ill she was. And the rest of the family, I discovered none of them were ever nurtured by a nurturing mother. So it perpetuated through the generations. And so when you leave that fear behind, then you're living in the grace of God or the spiritual guidance that comes to your life. Instead of the outside authorities telling you how to think, you start thinking for yourself. It's amazing how many people don't know how to think for themselves. If I just was listening to a radio show recently and they said, well, statistically, da-da-da-da. And I wrote them on Facebook and I said, thank you, sir. I'm not a statistic. I'm an individual.
Good for you. So we kind of talked about this with your own personal experience, but how would you say that someone else could achieve moving into the movement, leaving their history and drama and their worry and just leaving all of that behind, moving forward?
Well, I would say the first step is to start meditating. And then when you're meditating, you're in that higher space of God's guidance and the peace of mind that you want, because meditation actually moves out that mental chatter from the ego. So you can actually start to listen to truth inside and not follow, like I say, what everybody else is telling you to do. You get to come from your heart and do what's right for you instead of be a people pleaser, or, and in my case, I was a great doormat. So I don't do that today. The next thing is, I would say to find a counselor who is a spiritual counselor, such as myself. My next book, Paradigm Busters, Reveal the Real You, actually is going to have each chapter very clearly defines the details of how to move in your life and progress out of the past, with great instructions and exercises and stories and experiences of other people that have done it. So you can know that you're not alone. So to start meditating, get yourself someone like me who does regression therapy and can help clean out the consciousness that you don't want and replace it with the love you do. And then find yourself a spiritual support group, so that as you're working through these things, you have people helping you to say it's okay today that you're feeling however you're feeling, because what's happened in the past is we had no trust, no feelings, and no communication. That's what keeps us immature. So you need a support group where you're safe to say whatever you have to say and feel whatever you have to feel, and you can talk about it and get it out. And that's what a counselor does. It helps you get out the old negative energy. So those three things I think would be essential. And when you start on that path, you can pray for more opportunities that will help support you, people that could be friends that would be there to support you too. So in fact, that's how I found the Edgar Casey Search for God study group, which is very spiritual. As I prayed to God, I says, I need a group that does meditation because I don't know how to do it and I need help. So I showed up, a friend I knew, but I didn't know she knew about this particular study group. I says, I just heard in meditation I'm supposed to take you to coffee, and one thing led to another. And I says, that's what it is. Tell me about that group. And so you see, you will find people that can help you.
That's one of the great things about the internet now, is that there's so many of these types of support groups popping up, and easily find websites. You're not just online on angelicasgifts.com, but you also work locally, correct?
Well, it's wonderful to do it online. Personally, I have done counseling on the phone and on Skype, both, and I can do that. I would prefer if the person can come physically and do it in a personal way. I like that the best, but it is possible to do it online, yes. And I think Skype, or what we're doing today, which is a similar idea, when you are face-to-face with a person, there's something about the energy that has to happen. And when you're face-to-face with somebody, not just like a Facebook thing, but face-to-face with somebody, that energy of the person that's helping you or that you're talking with, there's an energy exchange, and that's very important for growth and spiritual growth. You want to find people that are in that better, higher space and share their energies together, and you have a it just becomes better and better.
So in a way, that energy is almost unconsciously contagious, would you say?
Well, yes, and that's where some counseling misses the boat. The people that have gone through all the college classes and gotten their degrees and their fancy letters, until you have actually experienced the situation, until you've actually healed, in my case, healed mental illness, until you've actually healed 9 addictions, until you've actually healed domestic violence, you're not really helping anybody except in their head. And if you have experienced it, you're coming from your heart, and that's the energy that heals. It's not a head trip. It's becoming real and manifesting that experience and sharing it. When we share, that's love. You share love. And that's where the healing is in the counseling and with support groups.
So for women currently in domestic violent type relationships or still experiencing trauma from past relationships, what would be the one suggestion that you would make to start healing that?
Well, there's a couple very big things that I've learned from my experience. My husband was coming after me one night to make me mincemeat. I won't go into the whole story, but I've written about it several times. Spirit actually came in and stopped time and told me what to do to stop it. And this is really truly what a lot of people in domestic violence do not understand. I had no clue that when I'm trying to protect myself emotionally from someone like that that's trying to attack me, my defense goes out to them and attacks them back. So I'm this passive little shy woman who's getting beat up, and I never beat him back because somehow I knew what goes around comes around. So he would beat on me. I'd say, "Stop it, I'm not hurting you." I'm actually attacking him, but the public sees the man physically, aggressively fighting back from the attack of the subconscious of the woman, usually man and woman. I've known about vice versa, but that's usually how it goes. And so it becomes like a poker game, and I'm protecting myself and then emotionally, and then sending him attacks through that subconsciously, and then he physically is attacking me, and everybody sees that. And it's really playing two people it's a tango. It takes two to tango. So it's a passive aggressive game, and I'm Miss Passive and he's Mr. Aggressive. So what they told me to do, when it was like time stood still and angels held him so he couldn't come after me any further, I was standing there in total shock. And they said to pray for him. Pray, God forgive him, for he knows not what he does. And I know today he still doesn't, I don't think, get it. But God forgive him, for he knows not what he does. God bless him. Then the angel said, now you can leave the room. Well, I had to walk. It was a tiny bedroom that he cornered me in. And I said, this is, I can't get out the door without going right next to him. I mean, who wants to do that? That's not safe. So the angels escorted me out. I turned around when I left the room and watched his face when he came out of the room to go to the other end of the house. And the look on his face was unbelievable. But what happened is when I send love, there's nothing to attack. I quit the game. And the more I prayed for him, and you pray for the other person everything you want. So if you want peace and serenity and prosperity or whatever you want, you pray for that person and that'll come back to you. But that's not why you pray it. You pray it to send to them because nobody loved them and they're looking for love. And it's not supposed to come from me. Love comes from God. So domestic violence is a codependent relationship with a soul basis. The soul is so looking for love, they'll beat up somebody trying to get it. And neither person has any love because they've been raised, like attracts like. So the answer is to pray for them. And the more I prayed for him, the less time he was in the house. He would leave because he couldn't I discovered a psychopath can't handle love, and he left eventually. So, that's a great way to get rid of people is to pray for them. I love it, but it worked for me, and I didn't have to leave with nothing. I was able to get a divorce and get my half, which was right, and make it beyond that. I was too physically, medically unable to work. And so because of, I didn't have to leave with nothing, I've been able to keep myself fed and actually help others to understand that the dynamics have to change. And that's what we all want, is love. That's why it says in the Bible to love your neighbor as yourself. You know, that's going to come back to you. And those are really parts of you you've been sending out that aren't kind. And so if you love the kindness and bring your negative energies back into love, then you become a whole spirit. We're all whole spirits, but we're just been fragmented. And we need to come back into wholeness and love everybody. We're all spirit.
I'll tell you, that just makes so much sense to me. I know, I feel like it's hard for some people to maybe do that after being so hurt, but
well, can I make a comment with
of course.
What I learned from this took a few years. It took 17 years of praying for him before I understood emotionally how I really did attack him. And I sent him an amends, a letter taking responsibility for my side of the street. And then we were able then to be in the same room. Didn't know if I would be able to go to my grandsons. I have twin grandsons, high school graduation, but I made my amends for my part of it. And we were able to be together and for 48 hours through the celebrations. And I didn't give away my power once to him. And then down the pike, what I've discovered through my meditations is, now this is a hard one to say. It still is difficult. He's alive in another state, but in spirit, he came to me in meditation and he said, do you know how hard it was for me to play that part for you? But you needed to change that energy and you asked me to do it. I really didn't want to, but I knew that if you were going to change the energy, someone had to play that part, and I agreed. So these people that we say, oh, I'm never going to forgive them, they've helped us. So when I said thank you in spirit in my prayers and meditation, I thanked him for that. All my negative problems about emotional things, it was like it just dissipated because I had created the situation and I took responsibility for it, and I realized he agreed to do that. I thanked him for playing that part, and it's not a problem in my life anymore because I took responsibility. Most of us like to point the finger at somebody else and blame them. But you know, the problem is there's three fingers pointing back. I'm the problem, and I'm the one that has to change, and I came to this planet to change that energy, and he agreed to play the part for me to do it. It's just like he was on a stage in a play, and that was his part. And I stand up in the audience, and I clapped, and I said, you played your part so well, I believed it.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's been a very enlightening conversation. As we know, your book, The Real Meaning, 2012, A New Paradigm, Bringing Heaven to Earth, is available on Amazon, along with your many other books and soon-to-be books. But this is only one of the many tools and solutions you provide to enhance the health and well-being of others by using spiritual concepts. So anyone interested in your work can visit your website, angelicasgifts.com. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Marilyn.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and thank you so much, Joy, for having me. Holly, isn't it? I'm sorry.